What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and it's Tuesday, so it's time for another top 10 video. This time, I'll be talking to you about my top 10 beasts in D&D 5e. I did want to apologize up front for missing last week, so we're just carrying over this top 10 into this week. I've been working on my studio and trying to get some sound reverb reduction. I think I can hear a little bit right now, although I do have a sound panel up, and hey, look, I have a door now. So I'm working on installing more panels, so more to come in the future. But my patrons voted for top 10 beasts, so that's what I'll be giving you this week. This is, as per usual, my list of top 10 beasts, not the best, not the worst, and the only other qualifiers, they need to be official published beasts in D&D 5e. We'll be using D&D Beyond for this. Before we dive into that, though, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, our returning friends from Describe. If you missed the last video where I mentioned this, Describe is a service available to folks out there to create box text, interesting, immersive, descriptive text for you to use in your D&D campaign. It has uses for players and DMs as well, though primarily now it's more on the DM side, but you'll find use for it as a veteran or a new DM as well. I mentioned last time they added the cartographer, which was maps and areas with different things there, and you can scroll down and see they're working on adding characters, player characters, and items and things like that. They're now over at 2,000 plus scenes, and if you scroll down, you can see the newer ones added here, which I do like, so you can get a quick reference if you've missed out on stuff. And they even have this here where you can scroll through and see folks' different testimonials. So I saw this one here, Soren Sorensen says, thank you for this scene, it's truly amazing. So I thought, let's click it and see what happens. So if we go ahead and click that scene, it's early morning arrival to the capital by ship. So you can use this, obviously, in that scenario or something similar. So let me read it for you. The boat rocks gently under your feet, rising and falling with the tide as the coastline looms on your starboard side. The sails flutter as the crews loosen the lines, dropping the vessel's speed to a crawl. The early morning mist parts as the sun breaks the horizon, and in the distance you spot the towering spires of the city. Soon the clamor of activity on the city's docks reaches your ears, workers hauling goods, passengers embarking and disembarking, and sailors prepping for departure. The massive city emerges from the mists, a sprawl of squat buildings and soaring towers, and you prepare to disembark. So again, that's beautifully written, done by a team of writers who are way more creative and have more time to do this kind of stuff than I do. So why should I focus on this kind of things when I can have a whole team of writers write it for me? And as you saw, this was requested by someone and then they made it a thing. So that's an option that you have out there, and you can sign up for Describe at the link in the description below, where you can go ahead and use the coupon code NERDImmersion to get $5 off your order. And again, you can subscribe from a variety of different levels. There's the hero plan, which encompasses everything. You could do monthly or annually, and then smaller different versions if you want to get just specific, like just cartographer, just monsters, and so on. So thank you, Describe, for sponsoring this video. To the extent of where I can use it, I'll be referencing those beasts using the Describe intro text to introduce them. Sorry, my bad. It is not $5 off. It is 10% off your first subscription payment. So however that works out, that'll be scalable. Obviously, it'll work out best if you're an annual subscriber. It'll get you the most money off. Number 10. The Almiraj, or the Almiraj, depending on how you pronounce it. I think Almiraj is what the description says there. But it is a bunny unicorn. And that's really what, it's adorable. It is introduced to us from Tomb of Annihilation, and it is a beast. It has dark vision at to 30 feet. It has keen sight and hearing, so advantage on perception checks. And it has proficiency both in perception and stealth checks. So as it goes for like a challenge rating 0 beast, this is nothing to, to sleep on. It's got a 50-foot movement speed. And one of the things I think is most interesting is its horn attack does a D4 plus 3 damage. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but this little bunny unicorn has the capability of murdering a first-level character. I mean, it's not uncommon, depending on how you generate stats and things, for low-level casters like sorcerers or wizards to come in around 7 or 8 hit points. So if this guy hits doing a D4 plus 3 damage, you could, if you roll a 4, knock out a character and they're knocked out by a bunny unicorn, let alone if you crit and double that to 2d4 plus 3. But I just think they're super cute, and, it's a bummer because I don't feel like they get a lot of use. They're available for purchase in Portland Zaro in the Tomb of Annihilation book. And there is this little qualifier here that your DM can allow you to use them as a familiar via the Find Familiar spell, which I would encourage everyone to let your players do that if they'd like. But yeah, it's got dark vision, it's got decent perception and stealth, got that advantage on perception and hearing, sight and hearing. It's pretty cool, and it's also, I mean, look at this face. How could you say no to that face? Number 9. The Bloodhawk. I had to have some sort of flying creature on here, and I always liked the concept of being a character, ranger-esque, foresty character, who has a falcon, right? I looked into falconry as a hobby, and I was going down that path for a while, and it just became not viable for me in my current scenario. And, it might also, I've always liked the concept of having a pet falcon for scouting or hunting. And then it was probably only exacerbated by the Mummy movie, right? Because you've got Horus, the Peregrine Falcon, in that movie as well. But a Bloodhawk is a really badass small beast character. It's got a 60-foot fly speed, so this thing can zip around. It has a decent AC of 12 for a creature that's that small. We have keen sight, so advantage on perception checks relying on sight. Pack tactics for advantage on attacks, and an attack that does a d4 plus 2 piercing damage. The only thing I wish Bloodhawks had was flyby, so that you could fly and attack with advantage and fly away. I'm assuming they don't have that because that would be too powerful. And again, they also have proficiency in perception, and they have this really cool piece that they're called Bloodhawks because of the name of the crimson feathers and their aggressive nature. Plus, they have like a dagger-like beak. This is something I would love to see art of, official 5e art of. Unfortunately, we don't have it, but again, I really like them. Number 8. The Tressym. Again, I remember when these were first introduced to us in Storm King's Thunder. I remember flipping through the back of the book when I first got it. And this is honestly one of the best beasts out there for a familiar if your DM is willing to use the alternate rule to let you have one. So they're intelligent. They have an intelligence of 11. They are smarter than some characters I've played, right? So that's something to consider. These things are as intelligent or more intelligent than the average player character. They have both a climb speed, which seems kind of unnecessary given the flight, but a 40-foot fly speed and 40-foot movement speed on the ground. 12 AC, 5 hit points, proficiency in perception and stealth, but now we get into the good stuff. Immune to poison and the poison condition. They have dark vision. They understand common, but they can't speak it. So rather than like you talking to a dog or a cat and trying to have them perform some sort of trick or something like that, this intelligent creature with an 11 intelligence fully understands the common language, and in my mind probably can follow some pretty advanced commands because of the 11 intelligence. They also have some other really cool abilities. Detect invisibility. Within 60 feet, magical invisibility fails to conceal anything from them, so a great recon. Especially, remember, if your DM's allowing you to use it as your familiar, you can see through your familiar's eyes, therefore seeing things that are invisible. Keen smell, so advantage on perception checks based on smell. And poison sense can detect whether a substance is poisonous by taste, touch, or smell, which is not a problem for the Tressym because they're immune to poison. So this can you can have your Tressym be your sort of your tester, sniff your food before you eat it at the table, make sure everything's all kosher. And I mean, it has a claw attack that does 1 slashing damage. Nothing crazy there, but this is like a cat familiar, but significantly better because you have all of these other interesting magical abilities. Plus, they're literally just a winged cat. And it even says like to the point where they can live up to 20 years. And it says, there's a little bit of backstory about how they mate and things like that, what they eat, and how they could even remember that like a human who used a wand of lightning bolts, they remember that. Be careful, wary of humans with sticks of power. So either way, very cool. Again, another creature that I'd recommend you allow your players to use as a familiar if they want to. Number 7. Coming to us from Icewind Dale, Realm of the Frost Maiden, we have the Giant Walrus. This creature is an absolute beast, no pun intended, as they can just wreck house. They're crazy, right? So only an armor class of 9. They're not avoiding many hits, but 85 hit points. Dark Vision, which is interesting, I thought. Can hold their breath for 30 minutes. And then they have the attacks, which is really where it comes through, right? 2 attacks, 1 body flop, and 1 with tusks. So first of all, it has an attack called Body Flop. I feel like that's an opportunity you could have used to use Body Slam and make it seem like a Pokemon, and you missed that opportunity. But Body Flop does 2d8 plus 6 bludgeoning damage, and the Tusks attacks do 3d6 plus 6 piercing damage. It is only challenge rating 4, and it still has a 20-foot on-land speed and a 40-foot swim speed. So this is definitely something as a druid you could possibly get access to relatively early, as it is only challenge rating 4 to use this. But at that, I mean, it's multi-attack, right? That's 2 decently powerful attacks that you could do as a druid, right? This Body Flop and Tusk. So you could shell out some serious damage. Plus, 85 hit points is nothing to laugh at. I mean, the armor class of 9 means you're probably going to get hit, but you might be able to tank through it with that big pool of hit points. Number 6. The Bristled Moorbounder. This joins us from Explorer's Guide to Wild Mountain. If you're familiar with Critical Role Campaign 2, at least part of it, you'll be familiar with Bristled Moorbounders. They are basically a giant razor blade filled cat creature. In my mind, see, the original Moorbounder, they have art for it. I did not picture it looking anything like this, where it is kind of almost like panther-esque with these big long tusks and like goat-shaped eyes. I don't know why, but I just pictured Battle Cat from He-Man when I think of a Bristled Moorbounder. That's what comes to my mind. The green, the stripes, the kind of spiked armor, but having that be integrated into the creature, because they are indeed, they have a barbed hide. These things are nasty. They're challenge rating 3. Again, something you could get access to pretty early on as a druid. 70-foot movement speed, so you are zipping around the field. You've got a 15 armor class and 52 hit points, so decently survivable there. You have Dark Vision. You've got your Barbed Hide, which is going to allow you to deal retributive damage to any creature that grapples you. Again, it's grappling. Doesn't come up all the time, but it's 2d4 piercing damage. Plus, you have this Standing Leap ability, which is your long jump is 40 feet and your high jump is 20 feet with or without a running start. And that's okay because you have a 70-foot movement speed, so you can use that full jump to your advantage. And then you have 2 attacks, 1 blade attack and 1 claw attack. The blades do 2d6 plus 4 slashing damage, and the claws do 44 plus 4 slashing damage. So decent amount of damage output you could put on this creature. And again, they have the background where you could train and tame them and treat them as mounts. Again, the fact that you could be on a cat that leaps that far, I really have Battle Cat vibes in my head, and I can't shake that. Number 5. The Giant Elk. This is, again, a seemingly unassuming creature that can absolutely destroy a low-level party. It's only challenge rating 2, so you wouldn't think it'd be that strong, but all you got to do is get hit by a hooves attack, and it's pretty much game over for most characters at that point. 60-foot movement speed, so you're zipping around the battlefield. Decent armor and hit points. Proficiency in perception. They speak the language Giant Elk. They also understand Common, Elvish, and Sylvan, but can't speak them. Technically, Giant Elk is a language that you can learn, in theory, if your DM allows it, so you could speak to the elk if you so choose. It also has a charge ability. If it moves 20 feet and then hits with a ram attack, you take an extra 2d6 damage, and again, you need to make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone. The ram attack has a reach of 10 feet and does 2d6 plus 4 damage, but where it really all comes together is in the hoof attack, which unfortunately only works on a prone creature, which I feel is often overlooked, but it does 4d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. So if you're able to in some way knock a creature prone, whether that be from your charge attack and then ram knock them prone and then move up and hit them with the hooves on the next turn, seems unlikely. Seems like they'd more than likely stand up in between then, but that's a combo that you can do if you have a druid in the party or have some other means of summoning a giant elk. If someone knocks the creature prone, they can stomp them for 4d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. In my experience, most DMs have removed the prone part or honestly just completely overlooked it, but it's something to consider if you play with someone who plays strictly by rules as written. Number 4. the Ice Spider Queen. This one comes to us from Storm King's Thunder, and I honestly don't remember it in that book at all. But it's cool because I've actually used creatures similar to this in my own game and didn't know there was an official stat block for something like it. So this is the Queen. There is a lesser Ice Spider, but the Queen's obviously where it's at. Again, we have decent armor and hit points, climb and walking speed of 30 feet, stealth proficiency, and then resistance to cold damage. You could also bump this up to immunity to cold damage if you like. Also, blind sight, I think most spiders have that as well. Spider climb and web sense and web walker, all things that most spider type creatures have. But this one also has cold aura. Any creature that starts its turn within 5 feet of the Queen takes 2d4 cold damage. Now, this isn't like a retributive thing where if you hit it, it takes the damage. If you just start your turn next to it, you take the damage, which is huge, especially in a creature that can generate web and lock you into place. Then it has a bite attack like all spiders have. It does piercing damage. You must make a con save or be poisoned. I would have liked to have seen a little bit of cold damage on the bite attack as well. It seems like that makes sense. But otherwise, it's 2d8 poison damage, and then if they're reduced to 0 hit points, they're stable but poisoned for 1 hour, and then they're paralyzed even if they gain hit points back. And then you have the web attack, as most spiders do, 30-60. If you're hit by it, you're restrained by the webbing. While restrained in the Ice Spider Queen's web, you take a d4 cold damage at the start of each of your turns. As an action, you can make a strength check to burst out of the webbing, and it can also be attacked and destroyed as vulnerability to fire damage, and so on. So it has a web attack that does cold damage. If you're next to it, you take cold damage. And it, again, has the resistance. I really like this, and I think this works really well, too, as a template for you to use for other types of creatures, right? You could obviously make a lightning spider queen or an acid spider queen and just adapt this kind of concept to multiple different things, right? I immediately think of Galvantula, the Pokemon, as an electric spider and using like an electro web type attack. There's a lot of options for you there. I think this is good. I like seeing these sort of elemental themed monsters because they really only need to include one, and then with a little bit of creative thinking, you can create something to replicate all the other elements. Number 3. Stegosaurus. This one comes to us from Volo's Guide to Monsters, and I was a little sad to see Stegosaurus not in the monster manual. Now, I recognize that T-Rex and Triceratops are pretty iconic. I feel like a Stegosaurus is more iconic than a Plesiosaurus, but Plesiosaurus ended up in the monster manual. So we're pretty much now in full Ted favorite territory. Stegosaurus is my favorite dinosaur. It always has been since I was 2 years old. And again, a little tidbit about me, if you don't know, I was on track. I have a degree in geology, and my entire life from the age of about 2 to about 18, I wanted to be a paleontologist. That was my only goal in life. I have a massive fossil collection. I've gone on fossil digs. I even have family members who have a history of like high-end paleontology, selling skeletons to the Museum of Natural History and stuff like that. And ultimately, it didn't work out, and that's another story for another time. But long story short, I love dinosaurs. Stegosaurus is my favorite dinosaur, so I had to put it on the list. It's also nothing to slouch about, right, or sleep on. It's a challenge rating 4 creature. Got a 40-foot movement speed, which is faster than I would have thought of for a big creature like Stegosaurus. I do feel like the natural armor should be a little bit higher just due to the plates. But again, I guess the plates are on the back, and the body is most of where the meat is, so the natural armor of 13, I guess, is fitting. But you do have a 10-foot reach tail that does 66 plus 5 damage. That might not seem like a lot, and while I do wish it could have had multiple attacks, one tail attack for 66 plus 5, that could be a very devastating attack. And then again, if you manage to crit on that, 12d6 plus 5 could put someone in a body bag pretty quickly. Again, I love Stegosaurus. I had to put it on the list. It's just how it is. Number 2. The giant crocodile. Again, we're in the favorite territory. If you know anything about me, there are 2 creature types that I very much love in the world and also in Dungeons and Dragons, and Giant Crocodile is definitely one of those. My very first character I ever played in Dungeons and Dragons was a druid in D&D 3.5, and we played at a high enough level that my starting animal companion as a druid was a giant crocodile named Bob. And he was the rock through that entire campaign, the biggest damage dealer amongst all of us, and the tank that just took hits left and right and dealt them out even more. I'm a little sad to see the lack of the ability to get an animal companion of this caliber in 5th edition. There really is no way to do so. Even if you use all of the new rules and stuff for Beastmaster Rangers, you still can't get access to a giant crocodile. It's too high of a challenge rating. But let's take a look at this one. It is, from what I can recall, very similar to the 3.5 giant crocodile in that it does have a high swim speed, and a decent land speed. I think that's actually better than the old 3.5 giant crocodile. Decent armor class of 14 and 85 hit points. Proficiency in stealth that can hold its breath for 30 minutes. And it can make 2 attacks, one with its bite and one with its tail. The bite attack does 3d10 plus 5 piercing damage. The target is grappled, and while they're grappled, they are also restrained. And the tail attack has a 10-foot reach. It's one target not grappled by the crocodile, meaning you can't hit the creature that you're grappling in your mouth with your tail. It just logistically won't work. It does 2d8 plus 5 bludgeoning damage. If the target is a creature, it must succeed on a DC 16 strength saving throw or be knocked prone. If I do recall, the original tail attack back in 3.5 did D12s, which was pretty cool because I didn't get to use them that often. But either way, I love giant crocodiles. They hold a special place in my heart for my first ever D&D character. And I'd love one day to find a way to bring back my druid from 3.5 and somehow update him in 5e, or play a spiritual successor that would somehow allow me to have a giant crocodile as an animal companion. I guess the closest thing I could do to that would be like a sidekick, but again, we're limited in the challenge rating we can do for sidekicks. And I don't know if I'd ever find a DM crazy enough to give me a giant crocodile as like a companion for me to play in combat, but it could be really fun. Number 1. The huge giant crab. If you knew that crocodiles were one of the creatures that I really like, you'd know the other ones were crabs. Kingler is my favorite Pokemon. We're getting a lot into my personal opinions, a lot about me in this video. But anyway, when I saw this introduced in White Plume Mountain, I lost it. Because there's crab, there's giant crab, but then this is the huge giant crab, which is a huge size creature, has a 15 armor class, 161 hit points. It is a monster. Immune to Charmed, Frightened, Paralyzed condition, blind sight out to 30 feet, can breathe water and air, and has these massive claws that have a 10-foot reach, do 4d10 plus 5 bludgeoning damage, and grapple the creature. And it has 2 claws. I do feel like a crab of this size should have multi-attack and allow it to do 2 claw attacks. I also feel like if you manage to get grabbed and grappled by the claw of a huge size crab, you should likely also be restrained by said claw attack. But either way, I may just be biased. In fact, I know I'm biased, so that's probably why that might be a little on the overpowered side. But either way, I love it. There's also introduced a new crab in, I think, Ravnica, or not Ravnica, in Theros, which was like a Nixian crab or something like that, which is cool. Unfortunately, not considered a beast, so it doesn't fit on this list. So thank you all so much for watching. Let me know how you feel about the sound and the lights. I tried turning up the exposure a little bit on the camera, make things a little bit brighter in here. Let me know your thoughts. Also, I know I said at the beginning that I was going to use Describe to the extent possible to cover these, and I forgot before I said that one of the current initiatives they're working on are basically beasts or like animals. So one thing they're working to add into the monster catalog are like mundane creatures, crocodiles, deer, bears, things like that. So those are not in there. They're working on adding them in as we speak. Speaking of, thank you again to Describe for sponsoring this video. Check the link in the description and use the coupon code NERDIMMERSION for 10% off. And thank you again to my patrons over on Patreon for voting for this video. If you don't know, Patreon is a way where you can try to get a little bit more closer access to me, send me messages, and they get to vote on the top 10 topics. They get access to discounts on merch, as well as once a month a Q&A call with just them, whereas if you've ever been to the ones we do here on YouTube, you can get a little unwieldy as I'm trying to catch up with the chat, whereas there it's a very small, tight-knit group. So thank you all so much for watching. I'm glad to be back and have stuff set up so I can start, streaming again and then start making more videos, because a bunch of stuff has come out that I want to make videos on, and a bunch of stuff is coming out that I'll need to make videos on. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.